All right, I think we're good to go. Welcome everybody to Waypoint Community Office Hours. It's your boy Gerald. We got an exciting one for y'all today. We have a few engineers from the Waypoint team. We got Isaac Lauer, Britt, Joe,
Hey,
a bunch of great folks here, and we're going to be talking about Waypoint and Vault today. So, just a quick reminder in the chat: feel free to drop a chat, ask any questions, but also reminder to be kind and considerate of others. We appreciate that. With that, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and Britt is going to get started with the screen share. Turn it over to you, Britt.
cool. Thank you. Yeah, so this is going to be a Waypoint demo about Vault and how to integrate it into your apps with Waypoint. So for those that are unfamiliar with Waypoint, Waypoint is a build, deploy, release tool for container-based workloads. So yeah, you define your application in HCL, and then you use Waypoint to sort of handle the life cycle of your application. Let's just go ahead and get started. In today's demo, I have a short URL application that I'm going to deploy, and this short URL application depends on a Mongo database. So I need to spin up the Mongo database right now. I'm going to do it all locally for us today. So I'm just going to run Mongo in Docker. So and also I just should preface all of the like secrets and stuff that I will be doing today. It's all ephemeral. It's all in like my test environment. So even though I will rotate them by just deleting the environment, yeah, it'll be fine. So this is going to run Mongo for me. I'm setting up the default username to Vault root, and then the password to change me, please. And then let's go ahead and go into Vault itself. I need to grab my token to log into Vault. HVS. Oops, sorry. There we go. So I'm grabbing my root token for Vault to log in. Now, in like a production environment, you'd want to do this with like not your root token so that it doesn't have access to sort of all of the things. But just for today's demo, we'll just do it with our root token. So let's go ahead and enable a new database engine. And I'm just going to do the default path. And then let's create a connection. And this connection is going to be the name of my data or my project. So Charles. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this in. This is my like initial connection string. Oh, right. I've got to pick MongoDB here so I could actually log in. So what this is it's my database connection string with a template field for username and password. And then like my actual IP address. So we'll just do the same username and password that we passed in when we set up Mongo for the first time. So that's vault root, and then change me, please. And let's go ahead and create that database. And we're going to go ahead and rotate that secret. So now the init secret or the init password and username have been rotated out, and Vault is now managing this database. So we're going to go ahead and add a role. We're going to name this prod read write because I want to be able to read out of this database, and then also like the application needs to be able to update it. And we're going to set this to dynamic so that every instance of the application that gets spun up gets its own unique credential that can automatically expire itself. And for our creation statement, I basically have a new role in here that is only going to allow access to the Shorls database with the read write role in Mongo. And then we'll go ahead and just create that role. So now we have a role inside of Vault, and this should be able to start generating credentials to access my MongoDB. And today, we're actually going to be utilizing more of the Hashistack, and we're going to be deploying to Nomad today. So I already have a Waypoint server running over here, and then I also have a Waypoint runner installed into my Nomad cluster. You can see docs on how to do that at waypointproject.io. So since we have that, let's go ahead and pop open my Waypoint HCL file. And here, this is where we actually start doing the integration with Vault. So if you haven't seen a Waypoint HCL file, I'm going to go ahead and skip this first config stanza. And I'll show you that I've defined my application here. And my application currently has two like stanzas in it, the build stanza and then the deploy stanza. And for building, this is a Docker application, so I'm just going to build it with Docker. And I'm going to throw this onto one of the registries that I have and tag it with its git ref. And then for deploying, I'm deploying it directly into Nomad. And this particular application runs in port 8000. So I need to tell Waypoint that this is the port that I would expect my application to be up on, so that it knows how to route traffic on the deployment URL that it generates directly to the application. And then the fun part for Vault is I have this config stanza up here, and inside of here, I have an environment variable which defines a Mongo URI, and that'll be available for the actual application as an environment variable. And so this has everything that like I would need. Let me expand this out just a little bit so it's not doing fun little line wrapping. But this is just a Mongo DB database connection string. So in here, I've got a template for the username and then the password, the host port, and then the actual database that I want to access. And the interesting thing here is we have this internal stanza that you can define within config itself. And what this lets you do is it lets you pull different aspects of like your Vault credential, store them in this like sort of intermediary variable so that then you can then compose your any sort of configuration that you might need utilizing those secrets in your environment. So like if my application happened to use like just straight username and password, and like I could pass it a Mongo host, that would be the case. I could just do that in environment and skip defining this internal stanza. But my application happens to take a whole string, so I need to do that internal and then compose my database connection string. So we'll just go ahead and quit that. Now there's actually a couple more steps that I do need to do in order to get this working. So first, Waypoint doesn't actually know how to connect to Vault yet. It doesn't have a Vault token. So I'm going to need to do Waypoint config source set. I'm going to do type Vault and then the token, which I've already lost. Give me 1 second. HVS. There we are.
To the best of us, Britt.
Yep. My clipboard is only one stack deep. So we're just going to copy all of these things. I'm going to copy this, paste it in. We're going to grab our token. And again, I'm using my root token. In an actual like production environment, you wouldn't want to use your root token. You'd instead want to use like a token that is specific for Waypoint. So that, you know, just in case that gets leaked, you're not owning your entire Vault installation. And so we're going to pass in the name of or at least the Vault address here. And we should have Waypoint config source git. type vault. We should have this set up. So now Waypoint knows, now Waypoint knows how to connect to Vault. I'm also going to set up my runner so that it knows how to connect to Nomad. I'm pretty sure this is something that we have to do. Waypoint. Oh no, this is, sorry. This is already inside of the runner profile.
You want to maybe just show the runner profile and the pre-installed runner?
So we have here our runner profile, which is pointed at Nomad, and then I will go ahead and list out my runner. So this is the same runner that is inside of my Nomad cluster. So we can see MET3P here, and then MET3P here. And then that is going to use this default profile. So I think that is all that we need to do. So now inside of Waypoint itself, let's go ahead and Waypoint init this so that it shows up as a project inside of Waypoint. And I'm going to go ahead and manage some settings over here. HTTPS, GitHub, demofun, go shurls. And this is actually on the COH demo branch. And this is a public repo, so I'm going to do no authentication. And we store the Waypoint HCL in the project repository. And so now this project is set up to look at my GitHub repo for not only the actual application code itself, but for the Waypoint HCL file. So once we do Waypoint up, I'm going to specify local false so that I'm using that runner that's out there. This will go ahead and build my application, upload it to the Docker registry that we had provided before inside of the Waypoint HCL, and deploy it. And during the deploy phase, the dynamic variables that we specify to reach out to Vault to grab our MongoDB username and password, Vault will generate new creds for that, pass it into your application that's running, and then your application will spin up. So this is going to take, doesn't take too long. Do we have any questions in chat yet?
Right now, but I'm
cool. This is always the exciting phase, watching our application build.
Yeah. I tell you what, I love this use case. I feel like it's lots of people know they need good secrets management, but they don't exactly know how. Like they know the database password shouldn't live in the code, but like where should it go? They're like, okay, maybe I'll add it as like an environment variable on the platform, but like that's not ideal. They should probably put it in Vault. And like even the people who do put it in Vault, they probably don't have like ephemeral rotating credentials.
Right.
That's a pretty advanced thing to pull off. And doing it without Waypoint is like really tricky. It involves like a Vault sidecar and a lot of wrangling with the platform itself. So
yeah. So I've gone ahead and the application is deployed. We're going to go ahead and go to the actual admin interface for it. And there we go. Here's my short URL application. And this application does a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just going to upload a text snippet. This was via Waypoint. We're just going to upload that. So we know that the application is running. We can actually we can actually stuff things into our database, and I should be able to copy this link and go to it and actually grab things out of the database.
yeah, that's awesome.
So there's that.
Can you go back?
We do have one question, I think. If you again, we asked a question on the runner profile, on what exactly the runner profile is.
Yeah. So when you use runners, We have this feature, runner profiles. So when, for example, when we go and like do that deploy, we need to know specifically like the thing that does the deploy needs to know like where it's doing that deploy, and like what options it needs. And so all of those options are like inside of that profile, and like the set. So like that would be like where Nomad actually like lives. So what's it called? So that we know that we're targeting like the right Nomad environment. You can also like have multiple profiles for different types of environments. So in this example, I just have one, but like you could have profiles for like different like production, development, QA, and have those each target different deployment targets. So,
yeah, one of the ways that I think about it is like the runner profile is what tells Waypoint how to isolate each operation. So like it's easy to miss, but that build when Britt ran Waypoint deploy and there were like the Docker build logs, that Docker build wasn't happening locally on Britt's machine. It didn't depend on any of that config. It was happening out in the cloud. So Britt installed a runner into the Nomad cluster, but that's also not where the build was happening because that Nomad runner, like it's running on Nomad in Docker, so it doesn't have access to a Docker socket. It can't do a Docker build, and you wouldn't really want it to either because then you could have potential leakage from build to build if the same process is doing different builds over time. So what Waypoint does is it uses that runner profile as a spec to spin up an on-demand runner, an ephemeral Nomad task that does just the one build. And it uses Kaneko for the build so that it doesn't depend on the Docker socket or any privileges. So that's one function. And then it also serves as a as a layer for you to be able to target which runner you want if you have multiple runners installed.
And this doesn't work just on Nomad. You can have runner profiles for the different types of task launcher plugins is what we call them. So you could have them launch on Kubernetes or AWS ECS or whatever other platforms out there have task launcher plugins. So.
Yeah, we can actually do a short demo of like how this would deploy on Kubernetes. Like without let me go ahead and get a runner installed for that.
While you're doing that, I got another question. We got a few questions here actually, so that's cool. This question I think is Waypoint usable with OpenShift? Is it similar to Argo CD? Love to hear the panel's thoughts on that.
Yeah, Waypoint is usable on OpenShift. We have an OpenShift specific plugin. You can use Waypoint to deploy to it. I'm not deeply familiar with Argo CD, so I can't speak to that specifically, but just like speaking to CI/CD generally, this is something that comes up. How does Waypoint fit in with like generic CI, like Travis or Circle or Drone? And because what many people are doing is they're using CI to do their deployments. They have like if you're deploying onto Nomad, you might have be invoking the Nomad CLI to deploy inside your Travis script after Travis has triggered off like a merge domain or something. Waypoint, one of the ways you can fold Waypoint into your CI is you can just run Waypoint inside CA in the same way you're invoking Nomad or kubectl or whatever it is directly. Waypoint is like an abstraction layer that sits between your application and the actual platform you're deploying into.
Gotcha. Very cool.
Something I know I've done is written Jenkins pipeline code to run Nomad commands. So people are definitely out there doing that.
Mm-hmm. And we have one kind of clarifying question. So we're doing this pre-flight with Waypoint rather than in a Nomad job template. Is this a correct assessment? What's the trade-offs, the positives of that?
So I feel like what this is getting at is like, hey, why didn't we just like template the secret in using a Nomad job template rather than like doing this stuff with Waypoint to get the secret in? I think this is what this next stage of the demo is going to show. And it might help to talk just a little bit about the architecture of Waypoint first. The way this works is that Waypoint injects something called a custom entry point binary, the SEB, in front of your application container as a new layer in your container. And that's the entry point that Docker actually starts, and it then starts your application. So you have a little shard of Waypoint that's running next to your application that knows how to talk to the Waypoint server. And when it starts up, that is what's responsible for going out to Vault and pulling the credential at runtime. So, and that's portable. That's not like a Nomad specific component. As long as you're using Waypoint, that'll go anywhere. So if you were to say pick up and move over to Kubernetes, you wouldn't have to figure out how to do the equivalent of that Nomad templating in Kubernetes land. It'll just work.
Yeah. And so to like emphasize that point, let me just back up a little bit. What I ended up doing there while we were answering questions was I went ahead and installed a Waypoint runner to a local Kubernetes cluster that I have. I'm just running like K3S locally. And I went ahead and switched over the default runner profile to my Kubernetes profile. Now, you could do this with like profile targeting inside of the Waypoint HCL file. I'm just skipping over that and just basically setting Kubernetes as my default. And I've switched out my deploy stanza to use Kubernetes as opposed to Nomad. I'm just commenting out that. I still need to tell Kubernetes, or at least I still need to tell Waypoint that, really close to the V button. I need to tell Kubernetes or Waypoint that my application is still running on port 80. And let's go ahead and git commit this. Oh, git add. We're going to go ahead and add that. Git commit. Deploy application into Kubernetes. And I'm going to push this up to my particular branch. And then I'll just go ahead and run Waypoint deploy local false. So I'm going to skip the build phase since I've already built the actual artifact. And we're just going to go ahead and deploy this. And like, notice I didn't write a single lick of Kubernetes, any Helm or anything like that. Me as the developer, I don't actually need to be worried about like what that looks like. Like switching platforms is super straightforward in Waypoint.
Britt, don't you want to write a bunch of YAML?
I've had my time. I don't need to do any more. So this is my release URL is actually like the IP address inside of my Kubernetes cluster, but I can go ahead and go to this deployment specific URL. And it's kind of wild because I actually have V2 and I believe V1 should be run. Oh, right. This needs to go to admin. Yeah. I believe I have V1 also running at the same time. Which I didn't think about. I actually have two different deployments running in two vastly different infrastructures.
It's great. It's round robining, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's go. I'm going to grab that URL because I actually want to. Oh, I should be able to do this. Let's just switch V2 to V1. So this one's running in Nomad, and this one over here is running in Kubernetes.
It's great.
That's awesome.
Something I think that's kind of cool about the Kubernetes plugin and what you just did there, Britt, is that under the hood, that plugin actually created like a deployment resource in Kubernetes, and probably a few other things too. But like that's not visible to the developer. Like they don't need to know all that information about what's been created underneath. So like plugin authors have can take an opinionated stance in what the plugins that Waypoint has are going to do. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually have a very old deployment out here that I did not clean up from the last time I did this. But yeah, there's deployment number 2, and then there's deployment number 1. So yeah, pretty wild.
Very cool stuff. Any closing statements from the team? I don't think we have any questions in chat.
Yeah, I can I can maybe just talk a little bit generally about these use cases. This is something that we've been really focused on for the past, for the past little while. Over the past year, I feel like we've really crossed an inflection point with Waypoint, where we've gotten it so that it's flexible and powerful enough that it can handle a lot of different use cases. It can talk to a bunch of different other tools like Vault and Nomad with runner targeting. You can have it deploying to all different kinds of infrastructure, different regions, different clouds at the same time. But like part of the cost of that flexibility is complexity. So we're trying to write out these use cases that validate these workflows and make it so that you can replicate them too. So maybe Britt, can you pull up where we've written out this use case?
Yeah.
Great.
And credit to Joe for writing this one out. This one's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a very cool use case. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So yeah, on our documentation, you can go down to the sidebar, and we have this specific use case. I mean, I guess not this one specifically because it's using Postgres, but it's still using like Vault and the config sourcer to actually pull in that configuration from Vault at the application's runtime. So
we've got a bunch of these in here now, and we've got more in the pipeline. And this is another thing. Maybe if anybody out there watching is like, "Oh, I want to know if I can use Waypoint to do X," or like, "What are maybe you've been struggling with configuring it to do something." Now would be a good time to like file an issue, and we might pick it up as a use case.
Yeah. Do we want to? Oh, sorry. Go for it.
No, you first, Brent.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we wanted to like go over some of the stuff that like we have coming up.
Some of the upcoming use cases,
or no, some of the upcoming features in the release. Release.
Well, let's talk about 10.5 for a minute first.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've highlighted that there was a new plugin that we introduced there. Maybe Joe, you up for talking about your Packer plugin?
Yeah, I don't have another demo prepared for that one. However, yeah, thanks for pulling that up for it. As part of our Hack Week towards the end of November or so, an idea that I had to work on for that week was a Packer plugin. But this doesn't work exactly how you might think when you think, oh, Waypoint Packer plugin is going to build a Packer image, because this is actually a config sourcer plugin, which is similar to the Vault plugin that Britt just demoed for us, where he got a dynamic database credential for his application at runtime. The Packer plugin that I made actually interacts with HCP Packer, and what it does is when you provide the plugin like a bucket name and a channel, actually the parameters right there: a bucket, a channel, a region, and the cloud provider. It'll actually pull the image ID from HCP Packer based on that image metadata. So you might be asking, why is this important? Like, Packer is for like infrastructure and creating EC2 AMIs, AMIs that are going to spawn EC2s. And the reason why it's useful is because if your infrastructure team has like a base Docker image, for example, maybe one that's been vetted for various security fixes and things like that, that image metadata could be pushed to an HTTP Packer registry. And then when it comes time to actually build your application, you don't need to know that image ID before you want to build your app. What you can do here is use this plugin to go and pull that image ID automatically from HTTP Packer, and then you're using this golden image when it comes time to build and deploy your application. So I thought that was a pretty interesting way to integrate Packer into the ecosystem. Maybe one day we'll have a plugin that actually builds an image using Packer and pushes it to an HTTP Packer registry. But this is something that I cooked up during our Hack Week. So give it a shot. And actually, in our Waypoint examples repo on GitHub, I think that the code that you see here in this little example, there's some other things that go along with it in that repo, but it should be ready to try out anytime you're interested.
And if anyone hasn't seen this repo, this is a treasure trove of use cases. You can probably find something pointing at the platform you're interested in, or maybe sucking config in the way that you're interested in, somewhere in here.
Yeah, we have a bunch of like AWS specific things. Lambda is a really cool space for Waypoint.
This definitely helped me get started using Waypoint when I was playing around with Waypoint and Nomad a few years ago, or 2 years ago. It's very cool.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, we don't have any more questions. Anything else the team wants to share at all?
I mean, go out there, try Waypoint, have fun. If you run into like any issues, definitely open up an issue on GitHub. We take a look at every issue that comes in. So
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you everybody for joining the stream. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Like they said, check out HTTP Waypoint, check out HTTP and everything that's going on over there. Dive in, experiment, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Everyone, have a great day. We appreciate you.
Bye, everybody.
later.